A strong character is not a rigid character. In fact, exactly the opposite is true. Although it's important to be firm when you know something is right and to maintain that right position even when the crowd is going against you and wants to put you down. It's also important for a person to remember that no person is God. Nobody is infallible or invincible. Sometimes when the tide has run against you for a long time, it may be that what you held as a certainty was in fact not true in the light of overwhelming circumstances. It's not only right, it's also smart to be able to see more than one way to accomplish a task. It's wise to see more than one solution to any problem. It's a good skill to see things as someone else might see them. Because when the plan that served you so well for so long doesn't work anymore, then it's time to find another way. It's time to bend. It's time to move on, to change, to compromise, to talk. Or you'll risk snapping like a dead branch in a stiff breeze. When it comes to lasting a long time, to standing tall and being strong, but knowing when to bend, the trees have a lot to teach us. I don't know if you have ever had first-hand experience of the tremendous destructive power of tropical force storms. I've experienced a hurricane and had a chance to witness close up and personal what a combination of wind and water can do to everything that stands in its path. The rain fell so long and hard that it completely soaked the ground and loosened the roots of even the tallest trees. At the same time, the wind blew with such force that century-old trees, tall and hard and strong, were blown over like so many toy soldiers standing on parade knocked down by a toddler at play. However, the enormous willows, some standing tall as a house and covering what would be an entire lot in some parts of the city, lithe and flexible, and bending and bowing gracefully to the slightest breeze or to the mightiest gust, weathered the heavy blows of the storm. They were almost the only large objects left standing after the air had cleared. Not only were tall trees and power poles and seawalls crushed by the storm, houses built to stand up under normal circumstances collapsed and their roofs were carried off in one piece and blown clear into the next county. Everything that tried to oppose the storm's fury was damaged or destroyed. Everything that gave way, that was strong yet flexible, survived. Maybe some of you remember playing the game of scissors, stone, and paper when you were kids. You know, make a fist and count to 3. At 3, put out a flat hand, paper, 2 fingers, scissors, or keep the fist, stone. In the game, scissors cut paper, paper covers stone, and stone breaks scissors. Whoever put out the winning object got a point. The best strategy was not to stick to one thing. You had to try and guess what your opponent would offer, and turn your fist into the thing that would defeat your opponent's scissors, stone, or paper. This game teaches a child to think about the nature of materials, how something can be strong or appropriate in one situation, and yet be the wrong tool, a losing proposition in another. It also teaches a child to vary his approach, to be flexible, so that his opponent can't anticipate what he's going to do, and recognize that even as you are trying to outsmart the other guy is also trying to outsmart you. You see, the nature of change is such that these things which today look so large and important may turn out to be mere flashes in the historical pan. There may be something else we haven't even thought about. It could be something as obscure as a population explosion among virus-resistant rabbits in Australia. That will be the key element in global changes we can neither anticipate nor even imagine. This has often happened throughout history. That's a key point, of course. That's why all our best-laid plans do sometimes go astray. it's entirely possible and even likely that nothing will ever turn out as we expect. And so no matter how much we prepare for one turn of fate, something will sneak up from the blind side when we're least expecting to be interrupted at our accustomed rounds. When that time comes, as it will, the people who survive and even triumph over the unanticipated will be people who are ready to adapt. They will bend in the first gust. They will step back and let something else bear the brunt of impact. I don't really think it's less important or more important today to be open to change and flexible in adapting to it than it has been in the past. It's always been important to be flexible and far-sighted, anticipating whenever we can, and when we can't anticipate, being prepared for all possibilities. Up to now, we've mostly talked about what might be called tactical flexibility, where a specific situation requires a knowledge of the various alternatives, and a specific set of circumstances requires nimbleness and dexterity. More difficult and more important is the inner flexibility and long-range adaptability that are called for from the person who wants not just to survive, but succeed. A very wise man once said, "You can't step in the same river twice. Every moment, all things are changing, and the next minute is never like the last one. Whenever you achieve a hard-won success, it's always because you've been able to create a flexible response to the conflicting needs and ambitions and feelings of other people. You've been able to sidestep the accidents of fate and the quirks of nature and the innate tendency we all have to depend on yesterday's solutions to solve today's problems." It's interesting to observe that at one of the times of greatest luxury and power and perhaps complacency ever in the history of the world, the heyday of the Roman Empire, a philosophy arose that attempted to teach these men who ruled the known world how to govern themselves. These philosophers, who called themselves Stoics, taught that in order simply to survive in life, let alone be a leader, you must learn to take responsibility for the way things affect you. At the same time, you must learn to bend with the wind of forces too great for your control. This kind of self-measurement and self-control should be part of every grown-up's character. After all, an adult is the leader of his own family, of his children, who grow up in part learning from his example. To be firm but fair, to be clear and consistent but flexible, is to possess maturity. Kids are delightful, but sometimes they are the most inflexible people on earth. Since circumstances almost never turn out exactly the way they want them to, they are on a constant roller coaster ride in terms of their responses, up one minute, down the next. In other ways, however, because they haven't formed opinions about a lot of things and lack the experience which can trick people into anticipating an outcome, kids can be far more adaptable than grown-ups. They can accept poverty or harsh living conditions or sudden reverses in fortune. Because for children, all things look equally inevitable and have always been there. Children have softer bones and dispositions than older people, so they're more apt to receive new impressions instead of repelling or opposing them. This is, like all our traits and gifts, both a blessing and a curse. Old people can get set in their ways, can get mentally as well as physically brittle. They can tell themselves that they know it all already, have seen it all before, and instead of struggling against the hardening of the arteries and the ossification of ideas, they can become as stubborn and willful as children who don't know anything, and with often the same harmful results. I think it was a great American novelist and keen observer of his fellow man who remarked that old people are on the same side of life as children and animals. and that they can see things regular people do not. Well, old people and children, as well as animals, can get so set in their ways that nothing, not even the survival instinct, will change them. Old people too often get fussy about their food. They also get particular about what people talk about in front of them, and who performs those little services that old people and babies often require, like feeding, and sometimes even changing diapers. It's uncomfortable to think about our bodies turning on us this way, but it doesn't do to be rigid and say that we'll never get old and set our minds into some hardened position so that we cannot accept help when it's needed and offered. That would be the kind of pride that destroys a person just as surely as walking into speeding traffic saying to yourself, the pedestrian has the right of way. True, but tell that to the ambulance attendant. If a man fools me once, I think, that's not nice, and I remember it. And if the same man fools me a second time, I think, shame on you. If the same fellow tricks me a third time, well, I have been warned and should have changed my ways and didn't, and I think, shame on me. Here's a little rhyme to remind you of this wisdom. Fool me one, that's not nice. Fool me two, shame on you. Fool me three, shame on me.